So many urban legends. What
Yes,
a crazy
not to be
deep.
confused with the legend of Urban Wilson.
Oh man.
Like, let me tell you, that's a story. That's an episode for another day.
That is a whole hour in and of itself. Oof.
But yeah, like so this one, I'll admit, I'll be fully honest. I wasn't sure where we were going to go with this one when you were saying, because how do you...
Yeah, this is a tough one to bottle because it's kind of like it's like saying bottle up filmmaking. Like
Yeah,
you can't.
Yeah. Give me an entire crash course in 60 minutes or less.
Yeah. So like it was kind of like, some of our other retrospective type things just kind of give some pepper, some flavor of things that are out there, and it's
some little bit of ganache to it.
It's the source of some of my favorite types of horror. Like a lot of things come from like real world urban legends or like voice of mouth, like spurred through the generations, has like gained a life of its own in the social ether. Like I love all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I like to. It is like it's kind of like a folklore. You know, just more modern, more grown out of, I'd say, 20th century urban environments.
Yeah. There are even kind of suburban legends if you want to get into it.
Oh, yeah. No, exactly.
It's like
something that definitely, has come out of, not too long before our time. I'd say, we're talking like post,
a lot of the ones that I've looked
era.
into have roots in the 60s, around that time, because I feel like that's when like a lot of boredom set in. So like these kinds of stories had a lot of intrigue.
In the 60s? People were bored in the 60s?
I feel like, in comparison to the onslaught of just entertainment that there is today, by like juxtaposition, purely from that sake. Like I think like these kind of things had a lot of intrigue, whereas nowadays it's just like beam of internet at our eyes.
Yeah,
like,
no, I get what you're saying. Yes, the selection is not nearly what it is today.
Yeah, so like these things had a lot more runway to gain life through like the social construct.
Yes.
But yeah, I did pick up the Urban Legends Traveler's Guide.
What is this? Please explain this thing to me.
I've had this for a couple of weeks. It's just it's like a magazine of like compilation of like the creme de la creme of urban legends.
Okay.
Across, I'd say Northern America, because there's some south of the border things in here too. But like there's like some cool stuff in here. Like there's Centralia. Like I love talking about Centralia because it's close to home for us.
Yes. Okay.
And also is like the roots of Silent Hill. So
yeah, which I never knew about for the longest time, even though it's not that it's within like what, I don't know, a 3-4 hour drive.
Yeah, it's not too bad at all. But it's like, it's very heavily guarded now. The people used to go in there like crazy, and like it's still like basically what it is a raging underground fire that like spurred through these mine shafts in Pennsylvania, in Centralia, PA, and it's still burning to this day actively. And like people kind of like, Chernobyl, people want to get in since it's not allowed. People want to get in there and check it out.
No, I know. It's like the moment you tell someone you can't have it or you can't be in here, that's the moment they want to get in.
It's like Pearson Community. Well, screw you. I'm coming over there.
That's insane, though, that like it's still burning.
Yeah.
To this day. Like, has anyone... So why not even... And when we say burning, like, are we talking like
raging fires
underneath, or is it like just kind of smoldering?
Well, yeah, I mean, different areas. I mean, it's big. It's a big deal. So I think like different parts of Centralia, and it's also like it's underground, so it's kind of hard to get confirmation of what it's doing.
Yeah.
Short of going down there and risking your safety. So I think it's tough to tell. I think that it was one of those things like it's going to be burning for decades. So
the half-life of it is...
It's not quite like a Chernobyl situation, but it's probably like Pennsylvania's closest to a Chernobyl situation. Yeah, there's things like the Devil's Triangle, Slender Man, which is kind of like a more modern...
Yeah, that's a much more recent one.
Yeah, everything with Sasquatch and the Yeti are technically urban legends. And
oh, really? Okay.
So yeah, like everyone coming out with sightings saying they've seen Sasquatch, it's kind of like gained a whole popularity of its own. But one of my all-time favorites of any of these is probably the events of Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Yeah.
Which has spawned the entire debate regarding the Mothman.
I was to say you're going the Mothman route there.
I do quite enjoy Me the Mothman. He is an interesting character.
Did you
Indrid
ever-
Cold.
Yeah. Do you ever like? I had back in school. I wrote like a dumb short story in like the guise of what I wrote. What if the
Beetle
Mothman,
guy is.
what if the Mothman and the Jersey Devil fought each other?
Dude, hell yeah. Why didn't you
So
tell
I
me
wrote-
about this before? This is incredible.
I wrote it in like the guise of like a kaiju, like a Godzilla type story, just because I was like bored. And
Dude,
needed it
I
for
would have.
class.
You know how quickly I would have jumped on this if you would have ever told me about this?
It was like a Monster Mash type video.
I'm pretty angry with you that I'm first hearing about
I'm
this
sorry.
right now.
Well, what the hell, man? What the hell? Man, I was just going to tell you at the restaurant. But yeah,
Man,
no, that's it.
This is such a good
But
idea.
yes, the
Why-
Mothman. Don't. So this idea is copyrighted. Nobody take it.
Email it to yourself before we launch this episode.
But yeah, no, the Mothman is a huge character.
I do love that one. Even like it's more rooted in the 60s than the
Yeah.
early 2000s film, the Richard Gere film presented it as. That presented it as being more modern. The book I think was written in 75. But yeah, it's an interesting
Okay.
tale.
Yeah, I actually remember the first hearing about something like the Mothman. But did you ever play? My sister used to play this game back a long time ago. I mean, you could still technically play it, but it's like done now. But it was called The Stone, and it was this. This was back when the internet was different. This is like late '90s internet, and it was like they would release a series of puzzles, and they were like tough puzzles. And you had to like use the internet or like to research to try and find the answer to it. And every so often they'd release more and more and more. And then like if you became a finalist, like the final 4 puzzles or something like that. But anyway, one of the puzzles was called The Bug, and it was the Mothman. And it proceeded that was the first time I ever learned about this urban legend and this character. And that was, it was interesting to like hear some of the stories behind it and like what happened.
Yeah, and it's like the larger scale scope of it is like the idea that there's this higher being beyond the understanding of mankind. You know, not necessarily like their kind of like Michael Myers. Their motivations are kind of beyond us. We can't quite figure them out. But they're toying with humanity and kind of like dropping seeds and like not even really warning us, but just kind of like letting us know about natural disasters or things that may go wrong. And the whole idea is there was an entire group of people in West Virginia that knew something terrible was going to happen, and then a bridge collapsed, killing tons of people.
Yeah.
When that happened in 67, right?
Possibly.
So, I think so, yeah. But yeah, that's, there's billions of others. This is...
Well, yeah, so what even like, to be clear, an urban legend, when I think urban legends, I do think like horror in some aspect or something thriller or some sort of scary.
Or paranormal to some degree.
Yeah, paranormal, thank you. There's the word I was looking for.
Or even just like not even necessarily a ghost story, but like there's things like the Yeti and Sasquatch are technically urban legends. Basically, if it's kind of like something beyond belief that kind of moves its way from word of mouth and like transcends the people who like originally told
Yeah,
it.
kind of almost it's mythology still kicking around, just in a bit of a different form.
Yeah, it's almost like mimetic mythology.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But it doesn't necessarily always have to have that quality, right? I mean, could you consider, like certain sports figures too to have like an urban legend quality to them?
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
You look at like baseball, sometimes like you look at someone like Babe Ruth and how they said, you could hit the ball 500 feet or something like that. I can remember my dad talking about, sometimes I think it was Willie Stargell or maybe it was Mickey Mantle, someone saying that he saw them hit it over the Iron Gate in what would have been Forbes Field at that time. And that would equate to like maybe over 600 feet or something. But like that exaggeration, there seems to always be, as you do with a lot of stories.
The man was 10 feet tall. He walked through and smacked his head on the I-beam.
But yeah, so urban legends don't necessarily have to have that paranormal or that horror aspect to it.
But there tends to be a connotation there, because I think that just honestly from an abundance, I think sheer volume, there's a majority there.
Mm-hmm. They almost remind me of like when you say like a tall tale, someone like Pecos Bill or Paul Bunyan. That I kind of think of characters like that in terms of, even though they're a little bit older than the urban legend.
You brought up Babe Ruth, and I think he also said, heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
Oh my God. How dare you? But yes, you are correct in that.
Truth. Can't deny it. I gotta lend you this magazine at some point outside of the context of this episode, because it's honestly really good.
Pretty great. So how long has that magazine been in print?
It's a relatively new one. I don't know if it's dated. It has an issued box, but it issued on, but it's not, I think it misprint or something where it was supposed to. So I don't know exactly, but it's a great little read.
Okay. So yes, going forward, if we're going to pick apart this idea of the urban legend, there's definitely that quality of exaggeration.
The Chupacabra.
Yeah. There's always definitely that, okay, did someone really see this?
Check this out. Really so the Chupacabra has variations within the years that it has been told in various towns and stuff. So it's also known as the Grunch, the Hodag, and the Ozark Howler.
What?
I've definitely heard of the Hodag before, but I have not heard of the Grunch, and I kind of love that.
It's like the Grunch. That sounds like
how the Grunch stole How the Grunch stole Halloween.
How the Grunch stole Halloween. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to make that a thing.
I've never heard those terms before.
Pretty great. They did do a Chupacabra-based house at HHN a number of years ago, and I gotta say that was amazing because they had it kept getting bigger throughout the entirety of the house, and by the end of it, the head bursts through the wall and is the size of a horse.
So these urban legends definitely start out of an oral tradition.
I would say so. In most cases, obviously, there's exceptions. Slender Man, for example, kind of grew out of the expansive nature of the internet in relative early stages. Mm-hmm. There were obviously video games and things that spurred it further, but it was through a connection of the internet, in Reddit, people were just spurring it on and pushing it forward. Yeah, there's all kinds of trails and stuff for Bigfoot sightings that you can go on throughout the entirety of the Midwest, and even up as far as Maine. I know I've seen cryptozoology zoos and stuff where they can buy maps and stuff.
Oh, there's so many. Yeah, there's so many things on
all kinds of stuff like that. But
now, does it have to come from? I'm curious where the term even urban. I'm guessing this.
It concerns me that you use the words "have to" because nothing has to be. That's my motto.
Well, I'm just because this is an interesting kind of genre in the sense of I've heard of it before, but I am not nearly as versed in it in terms of, even if you want to call it a subgenre.
Yeah.
What are kind of the defining characteristics of something that puts it, as an urban legend? Obviously, the title urban is in there. I get it. It's probably created, more city life, things like that. Do you ever hear we have
in the old
in
sense of down in the west, in Western connotations of go down to the city.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, we have some here in Pittsburgh too. You ever heard of the one about the plane that went into the Mon?
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently a plane. I think I don't remember how big, but a fairly bigger plane or something crashed into the Monongahela River, and then the government came and cleaned it up, and no one ever knew anything about it or what happened or something like that.
Well, you think about it too. It's kind of where the majority of the stories for the X-Files came from.
That's a good example. X-Files deals a lot with urban legend kind of stuff.
They kind of deal with things that were covered up, and the FBI is trying to gain information on it, but it's their whole thing is they're coming into this small town where this thing allegedly happened, and they're trying to prove or disprove it.
Yeah. It always seems too, I've noticed in a lot of the urban legend stories, very, very cautionary, I guess, in the tales or what happens in them.
Yeah. Usually there's some kind of warning message or some kind of theme of it's usually parents trying to warn their kids not to do something particular.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting how, even though you don't kind of want to, I don't feel like anytime when you're writing, you're ever necessarily conscious of theme, although I would highly recommend to do it that way, because I feel like if you are conscious of theme, I think we've talked about this before, writing something expressly from theme you got to be very careful with it, because if you do something strictly with wanting to deliver a message, then it could put off your audience very quickly.
Yeah, and I think in a light sense, it doesn't hurt to be conscious of those things, but you can't live or die.
Yeah, but it's interesting that the urban legends have that woven into it.
Yeah. There's definitely always kind of like a don't do this thing, or don't like there's some kind of moral message behind it to like behave or blend into society, or as any one of those number of things, give or take, whatever context for like small, like usually, like we said, it's like it kind of always fits into like small town mentalities.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one that when we talked about, speaking of urban legend, a movie we talked about last year, Trick or Treat.
That's a great example.
That's a really good, like, it kind of collects like urban legends and puts them together in an anthology in one movie. But even the story about the kids who go over in the bus, and then like they try to scare the one girl by sending her down there to find their bodies, and of course it turns out to be real. But that's definitely an urban legend quality.
Yeah, and like you said, it's kind of like cool how it blends more than one together, and it becomes kind of like this patchwork almost of like a bunch of different ones. Yeah.
And it twists a lot of it too, like the oh gosh, what's the actress's name? Or actor's name?
Anna Paquin?
Anna Paquin, thank you. Mm-hmm. How they kind of put the spin on Little Red Riding Hood a little bit.
I did enjoy that one a lot.
Like here she is, and the way they put off the story is like how this is her first time. Obviously you're thinking she's going to have relations with someone that evening, but then it turns out that they're werewolves, and spoilers, and they're about to go have their meals.
Yeah,
they've all brought weary men into their midst.
One of the things I think we mentioned in that episode, and I do really love about that movie, is that like it kind of takes the perceived victims and turns them into predators throughout the entirety of all the storylines. I kind of love it. There's all kinds of great things in here. There's the Enfield haunting, which I'm sure you've heard of.
I've never heard of this one.
I think it's largely if not solely the basis for the second Conjuring movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, there was all kinds of different things that spurred throughout those neighborhoods about what happened there. Largely, it centers around the idea of a ghost story, obviously because of the Conjuring grabbing onto it. That makes sense. But yeah, all kinds of weird disturbances and the alleged possession of a young girl. A lot of people, it's back and forth. A lot of people say that this young girl lied to gain popularity and potentially money because their family was not particularly well off. Yeah. So, it goes back and forth, whether or not you believe it, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Well, what's cool too is a lot of the stories, and I kind of repeating myself here a little bit, so I apologize. A lot of the stories find their origins, or like nothing kind of goes too far back in time necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost too like, would you, like, I'm thinking like one that's like kind of an older one, something like Sleepy Hollow has an urban legend quality to it.
I would say that, yeah. Horsemen. It's one of those ones that's been told so much. It's such like an age-old story.
It's a much more classical story now. But I'm kind of thinking about this here, how we've talked about how something like the Western is considered a more American genre, because it's one of the few countries that actually had the Old West. Does urban legend kind of strike that same balance?
I would say so, yeah.
I'm thinking so, yes. Obviously, it doesn't mean that we own it and then, no one else can ever have it. But it does feel like something to me that, like, similar like how jazz came out of the 20s here, in places like New Orleans and stuff like that. I almost feel like the urban legend has come out of, the inner cities of the U.S.
Sorry, my brain ejected my thought. I had one, but it's gone.
He had a thought. He had a thought there.
What did you do, Ray? I tried to think.
Yeah, so I'm looking at some of the things you got.
Feels like every state has at least 2 or 3 really solid urban legends that they're well known for. Not that anybody really cares about Ohio, but there's a there's a werewolf story that emanates from there. Maine has a lot of really cool sea-based ones.
Oh yeah,
there's one I remember looking up before one of the times I went up there. The legend of the Sea Hag.
Ooh, it's like okay, what's this?
Yeah, I guess it was a woman that went down at sea and dwells at one of the local lighthouses. Yeah. And apparently there's people that have claims to have heard or seen her, but it's like a lost, like a wayward sea captain's like falling victim to her, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Loch Ness, also a great urban legend. Okay. So like, it's not necessarily like linked directly to horror, but there's like a lot of cool horror stuff involved. Like we said, the Chupacabra, all kinds of weird clown stories and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Especially with the more recently, was it a few years ago? There was like all those stories coming out of people like getting dragged in the woods by like terror clowns and stuff.
Oh yeah, that was weird. That was just weird. That was
Strange
just strange. And then you
times.
had a lot of like copycat people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the urban legend it's an interesting, like I said, a modern look at, sort of like mythological tales and how people come up with them. It's almost, what's interesting too is it's very based on your environment and like where you've grown up.
Yeah, it's almost like regional, and there's like different like little pockets of it. Like no matter where you go, there's like some unique thing.
Yeah, similar to how the Grimm brothers went around and got all the old fairy tales.
Yeah,
I mean, you could essentially do the same thing now with urban legend.
One of the first movies I ever made was based off of the Green Man legend.
Oh, yes. This is another one.
Yeah, so there was this big thing in my hometown talking about the legend of the Green Man. It was this ghost that dwells in a tunnel that, like, if you go in there, allegedly he'll drag you in and, like,
yeah, and I think it's something with, like,
whatever.
he used to work for the electrical company or something, and, like, he went up one day to fix a wire, I don't know, and fell and got electrocuted but survived, but it scarred him and left, like, a green tint to his body, I believe.
Yeah, so we were aware of where the tunnel was, so we went and we shot, like, a faux Green Man story there.
Yeah.
So.
Now, I do believe that, like, the truth of that is that I think there was a gentleman who did get, like, hurt or was disfigured, but he was not, like,
I think part of why that
tunnel.
gained the popularity that it did, it was somewhat based on some truth.
Yeah. There are always those kernels of truth that go to any story, and that's always the hard thing. Is like, how do you separate, okay, what in here is
fact from fiction, as it were.
Yeah, complete exaggeration and just people tacking on and spicing it up for a better flavor, and what is the truth behind it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes good storytelling is spicing it up,
Yeah.
And making that as difficult as possible to separate. But yeah, there are many, each state, and Pennsylvania has multiples, obviously with Green Man and the Centralia fires. And there's all kinds of abandoned sites in Pennsylvania. It's actually kind of crazy how many there are.
Well, and especially too with the internet now, I mean, you can just look up so many of them.
Yeah. Especially like, we connecting everybody now, and it's just all those little stories find their way to bubble up to the surface. Stuff like Stand By Me, that's another great example. It's like these kids find out that there's a dead body.
Yeah.
And it becomes like a race to go find the kid and take proper care of him. And there's the group of older kids who just want to claim the notoriety and the fame and the prize money, so to speak.
There is always a sense.
Even within that framework of that story, there's little pockets of what's the one kid's name that he makes up the story halfway through about the pie eating contest.
Story halfway through, I don't know.
In Stand By Me, when they make up
I'm trying to remember the name, but yes, continue.
Yeah, he makes up the story about lard ass eating in the pie eating contest, and that's like that in and of itself is like an urban legend.
Yeah,
because it's like this piece of history just from this small town that like is made in like in the Paul Bunyan sense, made into like this bigger, larger than life kind of sensibility.
Well, yeah, there is that. Now, I was going to mention there is that child quality to some of the urban legends. There's that, or like that dare. There's almost like every almost kind of starts off with like and ends with like a dare. It's a way of like daring you, like the Green Man Tunnel or well,
it's because like I feel like that was big into the times of like I would say like the 50s up until like the late 80s.
Yeah.
There was like kids would just go on their bikes and go and do something.
Like exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's like now like kids are just locked in their homes, or like they go over to somebody else's house. It's like it was a different time before then. Where like my parents' generation, they would just go off and on their bikes and like just be back before the sun's down. It's like the attitude. Like
no, you definitely had to entertain yourself in a different way.
That's where you get stories like Stranger Things and stuff. It's like isolating kids and making them alone. There's a lot of fear to be generated there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like as far as horror storytelling, there's a lot of good fodder there for like separating like the individual elements of a family and like having them act independently and like try to keep one another together. There's all kinds of great room to play there. And those times of like where kids would be on their own in such a unique span of time, that was perfect fodder.
No, absolutely. Like I mean, we've talked about. I think we've mentioned the movie before. Goonies has that urban legend harkens, which I think I never realized this, but is this? I believe this is an urban legend. What's the line? I'm thinking of the line in Airbender where he's like, "Is this a real story or a myth or something?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a real myth, all right." in the Secret Tunnel episode, but
Secret Tunnel.
I think the Goonies, the idea of like having pirates on the West Coast up in like Oregon is a bit of an urban legend, like that we don't really have any evidence for it, so we don't know if it probably never really happened, but I think that the Goonies story is at least tapping into that idea that there could be buried treasure along the northwest coast of the U.S. somewhere.
It was so difficult to sail there. It was like you either had to go through such narrow canals in the north, and there was no Panama Canal in the times of piracy, so you had to go all the way south of South America. Like that would be such an absurdly long journey.
Do you imagine too? That would just take forever.
There's no way you could supply for that. Yeah, purely by wind, that would be impossible.
I mean, I guess you could do it.
Oh, you could do it, but it would just be unbearable. Did you ever see the AMC series, The Terror?
I have not. No, heard about it. But
really, really good series. It's I think they've only done 2 seasons so far, but it's kind of like one of those horror anthology type stories where it's like each season is its own isolated story.
Yeah,
but especially the first season, they're both really good. But the first season dealt in going like a pair of ships that run aground in the ice up north, trying to make it, I think, to the Americas, but I'm not sure, from Britain. And one of them gets trapped in it's a lot like The Thing in a lot of ways, but it's like they run into like these abominable snowman-sized polar bears that are like attacking them, and like the first ship goes down and the second ship is like trying to, or no, I think it's just one. It might just be one ship, but anyway, like it's very much in that like urban legend style. Like nobody makes it back to tell the story of what happens, so there's a lot of speculation.
Yeah,
and
no survivors. Where do the stories come from? I wonder.
Exactly. But yeah, and then the second season dealt in Chinese and internment camps in America in the mid 40s, and there was like the idea that a murderous ghost was brought with them from overseas. Yeah. It was really cool, actually.
There is a lot of just like off the wall like creativity sometimes.
Yeah. In
the urban legends. I'm thinking of one now as well, like a famous book, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
The famous characters Boo Radley in it.
That's a great example.
Like they never see, but there's that, it kind of harkens back to what I was saying before, that a lot of the stories are kind of touched with that child imagination and vigor, essentially, like how they perceive, how you perceive the world when you're younger, and how they are frightened by Boo Radley or the house that he lives in, and ultimately, of course, how he ends up being the one who rescues them in the end, or saves their life, protects them, even though he's seen at first as a recluse, which I guess technically he is in the book, but he's not a bad person. Yeah, so that's definitely one of the more famous.
Well, kind of like too, we loosely brought up The Sandlot. The Sandlot's kind of like an urban legend with the beast.
Oh yeah, no, my God, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, no, Sandlot is like with the whole idea of the story behind the dog,
and they just blow the whole idea completely out of proportion. It's just the dog.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God,
giant gorilla dog thing that ate one kid already.
Never ate anyone. And I think the dog's name is Hercules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of us ever knew what that meant, but we were all amazed by it.
No, that is like a perfect example of urban legend, and just the way he narrates it, and how I brought up baseball before. I was thinking it was there, it just didn't come out.
That's fair.
But yeah, and like how they like talk about Babe Ruth, and like, what? How do you not know him? Yeah, she even wrote her name on it. Ruth. Someone
some lady Ruth. Gave it to him. But yeah. Yeah, it's just it is kind of everywhere. It permeates a lot of things, and I think it's just like so much like I said with the 60s, like around that time, I feel like a lot of word of mouth storytelling boiled to the surface from like decades previous. And a lot of, like we said, like kids going out, just, having adventures. Like that's about the time a lot of kids who went out and did that, started going out and doing that kind of thing, really were like in a position to tell their stories and like have things get out into culture in a wider array. Yeah. So I feel like that's why that stuff permeated that time period.
Yeah. And that would have been like our parents' generation starting to come of age in the 50s, 60s. So yeah, that I can see where you have a lot of the, like you were saying, these word of mouth stories.
Yeah. And especially why that type of thing was as popular as it was, because it's something that a lot of people could connect with and still have like mystique and intrigue.
Yeah. Oh, a big one we kind of forgot, like alligators in the sewers.
Yeah, I always love this one because it's so the best kind of hokey.
Which I mean, I guess maybe like I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if that were to happen, because you know why I think of this is because this is a real thing in Florida. You can hunt pythons, and like the state government is like want you to, and they'll like pay you or like for however big the snake is, because the population of it has gotten so out of control, because I guess in the 70s or 80s people bought them as pets and obviously didn't take care of them and just released them, and now they're like in the wild and they're not supposed to be there. They're an invasive species. So that definitely, I could see that someone one time found an alligator in the sewer in like New York or something.
Oh, absolutely. Like, you know, who knows, especially with the crazy intricate sewer systems of New York City, who knows how it could have gotten in there.
I mean, could have just escaped from the zoo. Who knows?
I was supposed to pick up Newman at the zoo 5 hours ago.
But yeah, what I think too, you know, another one that has some good urban legend stuff going on, that, or at least pays homage to it. Do you remember the cartoon Hey Arnold?
Yeah, they did a lot of cool stories like that.
They did a lot of things like, you know, Birdman.
The Lockjaw storyline.
Yes, yeah. Stoop
With
Kid.
Giant Turtle. Stoop Kid, yeah.
I mean, that definitely really uses a lot of the tropes of urban legends. It really focuses a lot around that.
There were a couple of things on Nickelodeon, like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Was a good one. Like,
no, that was a good one. Yes, exactly. Town around campfire. Urban legends seem to have that campfire quality, too.
Even before that, like Twilight Zone, all those kinds of things.
Twilight Zone, yes.
There's a lot of good like anthology stories that like sap from this kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're loosely more connected by, you know, the tropes that are in them and the cultures of the locales that they originate from.
Yeah, there's so many good storylines in Are You Afraid of the Dark that were just like the execution of a lot of those episodes was quite campy, but I think it only like lends to the endearing quality. Like I still find them to
there is a charm to them. Yeah. I think that just I think, like I've said, one of the things that makes stories like this great is you said it before here just maybe like 10 minutes ago, the containment of them, the smaller stake stories. Like our cast of characters are more limited. You know, this isn't a grand sweeping epic. This is, you know, 1 week in someone's life or one night, something going on, that smaller scale story. Stakes are still big because sometimes it could be the main character's survival or not, you know, like that Trick or Treat. You know, obviously when this night is over, the world is going to continue tomorrow. Not for all the characters.
I think that's a cool set of rules within certain horror stories. It's like VHS, for example. It's like sometimes the stakes are the exposure of the event itself. It's like that the survival of that tape or that item getting out into the world and becoming known is like the stakes. So like everything's goal fighting the main character is to keep it secret and keep it secure. So I always find that kind of thing interesting.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's if you're like trying to come up with your own urban legend, it's a good place to get creative with. I think like you can literally just like kind of walk outside, you know, look at like, you know, the places you live, some of your local like parks or schools, streets, roads, and you can literally just say, okay, why do we call this street? Why is it named?
Yeah, think of like the backstory of how something got created.
Yeah,
like not even like the legitimate backstory, but like come up with it within the world of whatever.
Yeah, there's that magical realism to it. The way the stories.
Like honestly, that's how Stephen King kind of operates a lot of his stuff.
I know. I was thinking about that too. Yeah, Stephen King kind of deals a lot with his stories. Definitely have
like It and Derry, like the history of the town.
Yeah,
and like you know, so many of his storylines play off of like the history of a town or like the backstory of a particular family, how they impact.
Yeah, like it definitely has the urban legend quality going on. Pet Cemetery.
They're talking about doing that Derry series, and I'm very interested in what they do.
What series?
So they've been talking since they finished the remakes of it, that they would do an HBO series based on the history of the town of Derry.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, I hope they still do that because that sounds awesome.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of I know I've heard so many before.
If you ever get a chance to go to Bangor, Maine, that is the town that Derry is based on.
Oh, okay.
Cool little town. It's kind of like a brewery-centric town. There's a lot of little, beer places there, but that's cool.
Yeah, no,
you walk in there, you're like, this is definitely where they got the idea for Derry because it looks exactly like it.
Well, yeah, and it's almost like I'm trying to put it in. I apologize. As always, my thoughts are never fully formed.
Well, it's hard when we do a topic that's so broad spanning. So
yeah, it's almost like these are urban legends tend to be more raw form stories in their raw form. Does that make sense? Like they haven't quite necessarily had the refinement.
They haven't been tainted by the process.
Well, yeah, no, but not necessarily in a bad way either. I'm just saying that there isn't much of a, like, oh, you got to have your act one turning point here and blah, blah, blah.
No,
and all this. It doesn't have that polished quality of like a best-selling novel and
therefore feels more natural.
Yes, yeah, and I'm saying that as a testament and like that it's a good thing. Like these stories are much more raw and they've come out because they come out of that oral tradition. They tend to have that natural feel, like you said.
Yeah, kind of like the newspaper clippings aesthetic. It's just like it feels real, lived in, just all those good additives.
Yeah, there's a grit to it that you don't necessarily get with once you've polished something up like you do when you're trying to get a book sold or something like that. Because and naturally the urban legends don't need to be polished, because of that oral tradition. They can stay the way they are and they work. So and that's fine because there's a place for it and there's a place for them like amongst the landscape of storytelling. They don't have to work the same way like a classic piece of literature would.
Yeah, I was thinking before, I was like, it kind of lends into like some of the tangibility aspects of filmmaking because it's like the more you clean up an image, sometimes the more you hurt the story because like that aesthetic of the Batman versus the Dark Knight we've talked about. It's like the Batman took like a dirty up the frame mantra to like the nth degree and like really like used like art direction, like old like canny style lenses to like really just make the image like feel lived in, grungy and dirty. And it's like I think that aesthetic sold because like that felt like the Gotham from the animated series, like fully fledged, and it really brought something different to the table.
Yeah.
So like that in terms of like the storytelling of like something that feels more lived in, maybe not quite as polished, can be like an ultimate asset.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think there's something to be said about keeping that natural quality. You think about things like the urban legend of like Bloody Mary.
What a classic.
And there's, like I said, there's that dare quality again to it.
The man with the hook for a hand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And they're not, now you can literally take those ideas and create inspiration from them. And then you could make like a longer, more polished story out of it. But the kernel, that's why I go back to that. They're like as close to a story in its raw form as you can get.
Yeah.
Or in its immediate state without having to, hasn't had the editorial process, but in a good way though.
But yeah, like you hear some people say sometimes it's like killed by committee in terms of like, too extensively workshopping something. It's like, sometimes one person telling a story is the best way.
No, yeah. And their brevity is what's, I think, keeps them alive too. They're not long epics. They're in or out. They're let's get in, let's get out. Let me tell you this story. Similar to how, the way we look at, we've said it before, snackable media, the way we do now with social media, like TikTok videos. Urban legends are similar to that. They're shorter stories that you brought up before you can pepper through.
Well, we even mentioned too in the Twitch episode when Christina on. It's like that campfire style. Yeah. Just telling a ghost story around a campfire. There's something to the simplicity of that and the atmosphere of that. That's like
it something primal about these stories. There's a more primal quality to them.
Yeah, and I think that's where like a lot of just any one of the dozens of ones we brought up, like why they endear so long is because there's a natural, like an authenticity, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, and because they're still kept alive through an oral tradition more so than a written down. They have that older. They harken back to like the original form storytelling for us as a species.
And I think, like, too, like, I think partly why I brought up Batman is because it's like, how many times has Batman been retold?
Yeah.
Or repackaged or repolished? And it's like, you know, these things, like, just because somebody may have gotten it wrong or maybe didn't do it justice or didn't do it some right way or wrong way, you know, doesn't mean that somebody else can't pick it up and do it another way. It's just, like, for example, too, like, by the same token, Joker. It's like a character that you never thought you would look at in an isolated form and sympathize with.
Yeah.
Todd Phillips found a way to do that. So,
No,
nothing's really off the table at this point. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential within the urban legend to find some maybe different ways of thinking, maybe different ways of approaching stuff. Like any of the millions of things we've mentioned that tap into them have brought up a lot of success as a result. And I think that there's kernels of wisdom in a lot of these urban legends as far as how you approach a story or how you may approach telling a story.
There's still probably so many that you've never even heard of that I certainly have never even heard of because they live.
That's why I do things like buy magazines on like the topic because like I think like there's just a lot of cool things to find there. You know, like you can go through endless piles of Reddit threads about urban legends and still never reach the bottom.
Yeah,
so
there's
like
always that.
You never know what you're gonna find.
Yeah, and it's always like so strange what you're going to come across, you know, and whether it be a ghost story, a monster, kind of just a local legend in terms of, you know, someone's exploits, you know, in history. Totally the truth can sometimes get exaggerated, and I think that's always the point. But yeah, they are definitely, like I said, that raw form, that primal quality that is hard to match if you read it from a book or watch it on screen, as opposed to someone telling you that in person.
As they say, legends never die.
Ugh, how dare you. You did it again.
You just groan and kick me out of the room.
All right. Oh God.